How you doing, wrestling fans? And welcome to another edition of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast. We are the only wrestling podcast that brings you back 30 years with vintage audio featuring some of the biggest names of that time. The Pro Wrestling Spotlight covered all the news stories and breaking developments that happened in real time. And now we get to relive that history and those moments right here on this podcast. Today, we will review the show which aired on 1440 WNYG AM in Babylon, New York on September the 25th, 1993. Before we get to that, I want to remind everybody out there that our Patreon account is active and there's content and there's the entire archives of this program on there, not just the podcast, but the original broadcast of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, Pro Wrestling This Week, dating back to 1989. I just got a brand new batch of vintage WWWF audio, which I'm going to start posting for patrons over the next few days, actually. So there's so much there. $5 a month gets you in the door, and we really emphasize that your support as a patron helps with the production cost of this program. For those of you that have been with us really since day one, we certainly appreciate it. And why don't you just give it a shot for a month? $5. Listen to the archives. Take a look at what else is up there. Because if you're a fan of vintage wrestling and the history of wrestling, especially dating back into that decade of the 1990s, there's no other place to go than our Patreon page. Just go to patreon.com/John Arezzi. Do it today, and I would greatly appreciate it. Why don't we bring on Marsh, our producer and creative director? And it's been a while, Marsh. How you doing? It seems like we haven't talked in years.
Yeah, it's been a bit. You went up to New York. You saw some games.
I saw some games, all right. Yeah, I was. I really took a couple weeks off, really, if you look at it, and 2 weeks of shows. So we're back, But I had a great time in New York. Got a chance to hang out with my nephew, and I missed CAC because it was his birthday weekend. And even though he's a man, he's 26. I have never missed a kid's birthday. So that was more important than CAC for me personally. We had a great time. I got to see 4 Met games. They won 3 of them, which was great. So it was good to just kind of hang with the family. I mean, not just my sister, not just my nephew, my brother-in-law, but going to some, barbecues over Labor Day weekend and seeing some people you haven't seen in a while. And it really reemphasizes to me the connection of family and friends and face-to-face. And then you come back to Tennessee and, you get back into this. All right, I'm not interacting with a lot of people personally, except for when I go online, So face-to-face interaction is always good. It's good for the mind. It's good for the soul. But one thing about what we're going to do today is we're entering a time period where it gets a little bit crazy for me. I'm getting sick of it.
Yeah, this is one where you just really start launching all the Weekend of Champions information. It's only 4 weeks away.
Yeah.
This was the last Weekend of Champions you did, right?
It was the very last one. Correct. And it's kind of ironic. I mean, I got together up in New York with Frank Patz Batista, who promotes Eternal Con comic book conventions up in New York and pop culture conventions. And I kind of gave him his start when he was a volunteer at Weekend of Champions. And then he got to meet Antonio Pena and moved to Mexico for 7 years. And I think we had Frank on the show a long time ago because he really is trying to plant the seed of doing another Weekend of Champions, one blowout Weekend of Champions. And we met in New York again about that. And I told him the positives about doing it and the negatives about doing it. The negatives is I'm not going to be putting up any resources financially for it. I just can't do it. I'll promote it. I'll host it. We'll use the brand name Weekend of Champions. And we going back and forth with concepts. And he took me to this really cool restaurant, which is now a chain up in New York. It's called Lucharitos. It's a lucha libre themed Mexican restaurant, and the entire place is filled with lucha libre photos and masks and posters, and even the food is all themed lucha libre names. So it was kind of really cool to go to that. And then, I discovered that they have about 6 locations in New York on Long Island. And they started following me on my socials now, and we're having some conversation because I think that concept is pretty damn incredible. And they're doing really big business up in the Long Island area right now with this restaurant called Lucharitos. If you're a listener from Long Island, check them out. They're in probably 5 or 6 locations now on the island. Good place.
If they have any locations outside of New York,
I don't know. I haven't had that one-on-one discussion with the owner yet, although we're scheduled probably in the next week to do that.
I'm just curious because as I looked them up, there was, when I was in San Diego, we saw Burger King, Greenpoint. No, it looks like they're all in. There was a similar concept. It was a taco shop that had a bunch of Lucha Libre masks all over their stuff. Mm-hmm. And we didn't go in because we were kind of on a time crunch and we'd already eaten lunch. But I remember thinking the same thing. I was like, what a great, brilliant concept to do something like this. I obviously don't know the other guys' names. They obviously don't support the show. So Lucharitos is the one. But yeah, how amazing.
And it was kind of cool because Frank brought a little gift for me. I'll stand up and get it.
Oh.
Which was kind of really cool. He showed up with a with an authentic La Parka mask. So that was kind of cool. And the people in the restaurant were like, "Oh my God, that's very cool." And then he said he worked for AAA, and he was the guy on the ground at that Phoenix show that you went to, and it was obviously disappointing because it wasn't highly attended. But he was the guy that was that they had brought in there to do it.
Yeah,
but there are always restrictions with AAA. Just being able to contact them, and they certainly have. They certainly would love to, reignite the United States, but the problems that existed with communication from 30 years ago still exist.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I don't know what they got. They could explode this brand here in the States if they really wanted to.
It's wild how. I mean, I was expecting a fun time. I was not expecting this almost immersive cultural thing that was happening where you just go, oh my God. Yeah. I think that, if people just knew what they were doing,
there's a market for it. All they got to do is really build kind of an infrastructure here in the United States. But they're so set in their ways dating back decades. It's just the way they do business. It's like nothing is urgent.
I think we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we had to deal with when we were promoting them back in 93 and 94, and even me in 95. It was always a challenge because everything was like, all right, we'll get to it. It was like everything was so laid back and nothing was urgent or deadlines were never met.
Mm-hmm. So if you do another Weekend of Champions and you do it in New York, you get Lucharitos.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the idea. It would be kind of a cool sponsor to bring in, and we'll see what discussions take place. But I just loved the concept, and I didn't even know until he gave me the link, and he was like, "Here, let's meet over this place." And then when I show up, I'm like, "Now I know why he sent me this link. This is a perfect place to meet." And I've known Frank for many, many years, and he kind of. He's kind of like, if I didn't meet you, I would have never been. I wouldn't have never lived with the Peñas for 7 years, and he was the kind of the main liaison when they were doing some business with WWF back then. And then Frank, because of the Weekend of Champions convention, decided that is something he wanted to do, and for years now, he's doing one of the most successful pop culture conventions in New York with EternalCon. And he just did one in July, he had the big show there as far as a wrestling presence there. And that was the only part of the show, I guess he said, that really wasn't that successful because of the guarantee that they had to pay the big show, which was an enormous amount of money. But we discussed ideas, having the vendors bring in most of the talent, but, you bring in the hook, something that people have not seen before. So, I mean, discussions are ongoing. And there's no promises. I mean, a couple of years ago, we were hot on the idea and then had some discussions and I'm looking for venues and all of that. But Frank really wants to do it. And he thinks it would be a good way to honor what we did, what I did in the 90s with the conventions and as the originator of them back then.
Yeah.
He thinks a one shot could lead to more. But and I'm open to it. It's just a matter of the finances. I can't risk anything at my age. But Frank's a great guy, and we'll have further discussions with him, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. What's interesting, too, is the more I've learned about the Weekend of Champions and even where it was located, I've always thought that without your presence there, that the big event kind of stepped in and kind of took on almost the legacy of it. Like, it's kind of in the same spot.
Yeah, he
isn't
moved
it?
out of there now, that guy. He doesn't do the big event at that hotel anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of cool. And it really is cool to me because there's always people posting pictures of the convention. There's always, here's me with Ric Flair, or here's me with Woman, and here's me with Buddy Rogers. And I just saw a picture on Twitter the other day. It was Buddy Rogers and Ric Flair having a beer together. And that was taken from Weekend of Champions. So there's always content that's being posted about those conventions in the 90s. I mean, those were pretty historic events back then.
Yeah.
And it, it was good to be the first guy to do it on a regular basis, an annual basis, and to bring in the types of talent that I was able to bring in and to make each and every one of them a little bit different than the year before, with the opportunities to meet some of this talent that even guys like the Sheik in 1993, who never did one of these before and never did one again. That was his only one, and the first one for Ric Flair. And it was pretty cool. You look back at it, and even though it caused, they all caused an enormous amount of agita and tension and stress and financial ruin in so many ways. They were for what they were, and they were kind of historic in nature. So I was happy to be able to, when you look back at it, you're like, well, yeah, I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, amazing. We even showed a clip on Medusa's podcast of her cutting a promo on Sherry and them going back and forth, which was right there in the lobby for Weekend of Champions.
Oh, yeah? I haven't even seen that.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. They were getting ready they were going to wrestle for ECW, but that was right before Medusa ended up getting signed. And so she ended up going to the WWE. So the match never happened, but here was the whole.
The promo was cut at the convention in 93.
Yeah. Right there in the lobby. It was cool. And then you see a crowd starting to come around because they're yelling at each other. It was so cool. And that happened because of that. And I've seen that float around from time to time. Even I didn't know where it was from until me and her sat down and talked about it. But I've seen that a few times where it's all like, look at the match that never happened, or this promo or whatever. Like, pretty cool, Yeah.
Yeah, we ought to get to the point too, I guess. I'd love to bring her on because of, even though and here's the mystery about all of this as we look at what we have left on the WNYG run, and which really ends on November the 27th of 93. That was after the convention. The convention took place in October. After this episode that we're going to review from September 25th, which is actually Pro Wrestling Spotlight show 237, we don't have another one until show 245 or 242, actually, from November the 6th. So that was after the convention. It was the week after the convention. And as I uploaded it, I just heard what a foul mood I was in. So I don't know what happened to those shows previous to that. I don't know where they are, if they were recorded, if they were thrown away. I don't know. But this is all we have left. And then I come back on 11/27th and I quit and then we're going to automatically skip a year and go into 1994. But what I was getting to is that even though there's not a lot of audio that exists, I still have that appearance on the Howard Stern show that I took Medusa and Malaya Osaka to during the Weekend of Champions to promote it, through Fred the Elephant Boy. So that may be a good time to bring her on, because I would love to, review that here on the show.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
And I'll digitize that for you, and so you could pull some clips from it.
Yeah.
So maybe what we do is I'm thinking on the fly here. So maybe what we do is we kind of play it in the next couple weeks. See if she's available to come on, if she would want to talk about that appearance, because Howard was Howard, and Howard was different back then. It was all about TNA.
Yeah.
So it's not the Howard that interviews people today. It was all about shtick and sex. And so anyway, I will make sure I digitize that for you and get that over to you in the next few days. And then, of course, I'll put the whole thing up for patrons, the whole unedited appearance.
Yeah. I even wonder back in that time frame why some people even went on his show just because they knew. Like, I've seen people bring up that like Justin Timberlake was on that show and Howard Stern kept asking him what it was like to have sex with Britney. And they're like, how dare he answer those questions? I was like, why did he even show up? What did he think Howard was going to ask? Like, what was he there for?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And Howard admitted, in many interviews now that he wasn't really happy with himself back in the day. And what he has turned the show into is pop culture. And, whether you agree with his politics or not, but his interview style, when he's interviewing Paul McCartney or Bruce Springsteen or all these actors and actresses that love being interviewed by him now, he's really in a class by himself.
It's cool to see. It's awesome to see someone who knows that they can be better and do better and then actually still do better and be better. Like, the fact he's such an incredible interviewer and has been all along is so great to see that he's leaning into that. So
yeah, he has for many years now, and he gets better every year when it comes to the types of celebrities he brings on. But anyway, we digress. Why don't we go back 30 years and talk about this program that aired on September the 25th.
1993, you were not happy. I have one more thing to pitch for you for Weekend of Champions. When you said you got to get something that no one's ever seen, I say you book Goldberg versus CM Punk. People will show. Goldberg says he wants to have a final match. He hasn't had it.
Goldberg versus CM Punk.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. They're both open for work, I think.
Yeah. I have a concept in mind for like what the headliner would be, and it's something that no one has ever seen before.
Yeah.
And it really would be cool. But I mean, you have to bring in a couple of hooks like that of people that you don't normally get a chance to get an opportunity to take a picture with or get an autograph or see. And whether we do matches or not, that certainly would remain to be seen. Whether we do the convention or not remains to be seen. But as we continue exploring these discussions, we will just kind of brainstorm them and see if they make sense. And if it can happen, it'll happen. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'll fade into the fucking sunset again.
Speaking of fading to the sunset, I'm sure WCW wishes this pay-per-view faded into the sunset. This was, I believe it was the Fall Brawl with a War Games match, and you open the show talking about just how lackluster it was at different times between you and Steve Beverly and callers. Everyone was almost more enamored and shocked by how the War Games match wasn't good. Like, I didn't think you could do a bad one. Like,
it made us sick to our stomachs. It was so bad.
Don Leibel is in Massachusetts. You say he may or may not kall in because he's covering a Killer Kowalski show.
Yeah.
And he does not end up calling in. So instead, I have the beginning here where you talk a little bit about the Observer reviewing the War Games.
Okay.
You talk a little about Cactus Jack. And then there's a couple things that happened in WWF at the time with people leaving that I thought was interesting.
Cool.
It was real bad, and we'll get your opinions on that later on. According to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, their poll as of this week for those who called in to respond for their thumbs up, thumbs down of the Fall Brawl from last week on WCW, this is the response so far. According to the Observer, thumbs up. 2 calls came in with a thumbs up, and for a thumbs down, there were 208 people calling in, giving it a thumbs down. So as far as thumbs in the middle, there were 9 people who couldn't decide whether it was good or bad. Even the much-awaited return of Cactus Jack was not done properly, and Cactus only had 3 minutes in there with Yoshi Kwan to signify his return to professional wrestling. In the WWF, there's lots of things going on. Tonight in Madison Square Garden, the WWF is running a show. There is a lot of controversy right now around several names in the organization. For one, Shawn Michaels left the promotion about a week ago, taking the belt with him. He's the current Intercontinental Champion. Now, we've heard rumors in the last couple of days that Shawn might be back with the organization, and I guess tonight would be the chance to see if it's really true or not. Shawn Michaels is considered by many people as one of the best workers in the wrestling business. He did quit the company early last week, and that was before a match took place where he was going to lose the title. So we're trying to find a little bit more about that situation. Other top-name guys in the WWF who were removed temporarily from all booking sheets in the future included Matt Bourne, who was known as Doink the Clown, and the Steiner brothers. They have been removed from booking sheets for the next 8 weeks, and what that indicates, we'll leave it up to your imagination. We will be trying to check to see if the Steiners will be on the show tonight at the Garden. That was another situation that may be developing, that they may resurface tonight. So a lot of moving comings and goings in the WWF right now with talent.
Mm-hmm.
Yoshi Kwan.
Do
you remember him?
No.
He was known as Chris Champion, and he was like this kind of fake martial artist type. They gave him like the full
is that
shoe.
the guy? That wasn't the guy with all the. Was that the guy with all the tattoos all over his?
No,
that was another WWE guy, right?
Yeah, that was a WWE guy. I think that was
whatever. He had all Chinese like.
But then he had like these crazy painted on eyebrows. I was looking at him. I was trying to remember like much about him, and I just came across a post recently where someone's like, "Look, it's Roman Reigns." Because he has a very similar look, but not at the same time.
I don't really remember him. It's crazy.
A 3-minute match with Cactus Jack is his big return after all that Vader stuff.
They didn't do what they should have done. And they rarely did back then.
Yeah. This is crazy.
Yeah.
ECW is one of the best things for Cactus Jack now I think about it.
Oh, yeah.
If it wasn't for that, I don't know if WWF would have been able to pick him up.
Yeah. Jim Ross was a huge supporter. And it was kind of Ross that got him in. And McMahon, of course, made the famous line, "All right, I'll bring him in, but I'm not going to show anybody his face." Hey, listen, we didn't even touch upon, it's now TKO Holdings.
Yeah.
It's the merger is done. Vince with his little pencil thin mustache that made him look like a silent film heel or villain from back in the day showed up on Wall Street with those gigantic belts of UFC and WWE were there right in front of Wall Street, right in front of the big stock market, and Nick Khan, and it was quite the entourage there for that. That deal is done; it's completed, and we'll see what happens in the future.
For the first time in history, there's no version of WWF that's owned by any version of McMahon.
Yep, historic.
It's
very historic. It'll be.
Now,
I saw something in today. I mean, and we'll get back to reviewing this show, of course. But UFC owner, what's his name? What's the guy?
talking about Dana White.
Dana, yes,
Yeah.
because one of the big executives at Endeavor were like, how much the WWE and UFC audiences are kind of similar, and Dana White just came out today and said there's no real crossover between the WWE audience and ours.
It's true. It's a very small crossover.
So if they're going to try to kind of do some cross promotion between the two, that would be kind of suicide, I think.
I think it depends
unless you do Brock in there and you do a Ronda Rousey return in UFC. I mean, that could be kind of cool.
Yeah, I don't know that either one of them wants to fight again, but I would say, like, depending on how you did it, you could probably see some success, but you're not going to see like a doubling or a complete merger. Like if you did a thing where you could meet Conor McGregor and Brock Lesnar, yep, you'll get a huge turnout because there's enough crossover there for both, right? You can have Ronda Rousey ringside or come out and host a thing before, host the weigh-in, things like that. But yeah, you're not going to do a card that has a UFC match and then followed up by a Roman Reigns match. You know what I mean? Like that wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work. No.
But I think you can blur some of those things. Have Daniel Cormier come on to WWE. You know what I mean? Have Roman Reigns pop over in UFC for a minute. You know what I mean? Not to like have a fight, but to just do these little appearances. I think that could work.
What would be the best fight between, let's say, a Conor McGregor and somebody in WWE? Like a octagon UFC style fight. Who do you think would be a good opponent for a McGregor or somebody in that?
I'm trying not to make a joke and just list somebody who I don't like very much. Just watch them get their ass kicked.
I was waiting.
I wonder who could do a good. I know he's in AEW, but Malachi Black does a lot of like martial arts trainings. Yeah. I wonder who else does that I don't know about.
I would like to see a mixed match with Conor McGregor and Nia Jax.
That'd be a good fight.
I like to see someone kick her ass.
Yeah.
I liked her.
Me too. See, I was going to say
and
Johnny
brought
Gargano.
her back on Raw. I mean, I did fast forward. I watched about, I think I watched the Cody Rhodes promo, and I watched the Nia Jax return at the end of Raw.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? Why?
Yeah, I don't think anyone's clamoring for it. If you watch the 2019 Rumble, that's when she was in the men's Rumble. When she gets RKO'd, you can see me and my fiance jump up and start doing the yes.
Oh, yeah.
And JBL on commentary says, look, there's people in the fan jumping up and down right now, all excited. How could they? Like, how dare they? That was us.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's like, I I'm not even watching AEW, really. I can't get into any of it right now.
Yeah, and I'm just not that guy. I mean, I'm a mark when, I'm a homer for the WWE, I suppose, but I've given AEW a ton of chances. It's never hooked me. There's things I've liked here and there, but as of right now, there's nothing I search out anymore.
Yeah, get rid of about 60% of the roster and really make it good, because right now there's just so many and it does not, so much doesn't make sense. But I know there's AEW fans out there. But anyway, we're fans of history.
Yeah.
So let's go back.
Apart from this past year where the conversations about the Endeavor deal was happening, did you ever have a moment in your entire life that you thought McMahon would not own it up until he died?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really felt up until the last year and a half that, all right, he's going to let this happen and he's going to get rid of it. Yeah. But he still didn't, because he's still, for life, the executive chairman of the WWE. I mean, he's been appointed for life.
Yeah.
So he's still in there. He just got paid billions of dollars, but he's still going to be his old sinister self.
And here's my other thought, and it directly relates to you and all the controversies you've seen on him and the tapes we've listened to you guys saying it, that even when the callers would say, oh, I hope Vince goes down, I hope someone takes Vince down, and you would say, but that might not be good for the wrestling business, because if Vince goes down, the WWE goes away.
Mm-hmm.
how is it supposed to survive without him? What's notably historic here is by having the larger company own it, that'll never be true again. Vince can go down. Triple H could go down. Everybody in any power spot could be involved in, hopefully not, right? A terrible scandal with lawsuits, and they just get plucked out and someone else goes in, and then the longevity carries on.
Yeah, the company continues on forever now.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is.
I think that's cool.
Yeah, it'll be around. It'll be interesting to see what they do and if there's any branding changes or other changes that are going to affect the product. And I think there's still there's really going to be a contentious negotiation for the streaming, for the television rights with Raw, SmackDown, and all of it. I mean, all that's up in the air. So who knows where that's going to all land.
Yeah, that's true.
Changes are ahead.
Yep. Let's see. No one liked the War Games. Cactus Jack is back in a 3-minute match against Yoshi. HBK leaves the promotion with the Intercontinental Championship.
Mm-hmm.
And then Matt Bourne and the Steiners are also gone.
Yeah. Changes were afoot. It was not a good time for the promotion, either one of them. The ratings were bad. Things were happening. There was the federal investigation and the indictment of McMahon looming imminent. So it really was a horrific year for pro wrestling in 93.
Was there a moment during those years that you were concerned that wrestling would disappear altogether?
No. I always knew it would be around in some way, shape, or form. Maybe not to the exposure and how big it was, but because that was all contingent on what was going to happen with Vince, but I always knew it was going to be around.
Yeah.
It would never go away.
Do you think if the indictment and stuff took out Vince McMahon, if Vince McMahon went to prison in 93, do you think the WWE would have survived, or do you think it would have gone back to like a territories concept?
That's a good question. He obviously had talked to Jarrett about taking over for him, and Vince was always the driving force, his creative. I mean, all of that. I mean, displacing him, it would have been really interesting. No one can predict what would have happened and what could have happened, but I think the company would have still been around, but who knows what it would look like and if it would go back to the territory days back then. And if WCW would be able to capitalize on it.
That's true, too. WCW was not capitalizing on much here. And
no,
I could see that if he was in prison, that they could have a black eye after they're no longer on national TV. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. A lot could have been different.
Sponsors. I mean, they did lose a shitload of sponsors, advertisers when all that was going down, the scandals and then the trial. So it wasn't, they were, they weren't healthy financially. And that really kind of turned around after the trial was over and he was back in place and not going anywhere. And then the Monday Night Wars started. I mean, what really kind of catapulted all of it, in my opinion, was when the screw job took place in Montreal. Yeah, when he started coming out and getting more involved, not just Vince the announcer, but Vince the owner. And I'll never forget that Monday Night Raw when Brett and Vince were having problems and he actually grabbed Vince by the lapel and shook him at the announcer's table. That I was like, this is going to a place that I didn't think I'd ever see. And I remember watching the screw job. And then of course, with the Monday Night Wars and WCW spending all the kinds of money to bring talent over and hauling that. I mean, it just turned the whole business around.
Yeah.
I was like, I think I should have stayed in this for a little bit longer. I've never been one for good timing when it came to my pro wrestling endeavors.
So I know it was 3 years later, and you get into it with Steve Beverly here in a minute. We're going to listen to 2 different clips from him. And you did talk about Weekend of Champions getting the original Sheik. But on the idea of Vince getting involved that way, this is the time frame where he's actively doing stuff in Memphis.
Yeah.
And you guys talk about that for a minute, so I won't go into the details of that. I wonder if this bug in his ear had any impact on how he started handling his stuff. Why did he go out there when he never would have stepped out there before? What was happening in Vince's mind and ego? There was something like, I need to go out there, even in the regards of the screw job, right? Before, he would have just sent stooges or someone, right, out there to make sure something's going on, because he was always going to be the announcer guy. Why was he suddenly ringside? You know?
Why don't you reach out to him and see if he'll come on the show?
I'm going to give him a text real quick. I'm going to tweet at him.
But he would have to come on and shave that mustache first.
Yeah, right there. Loser.
Or I would grow one.
Yeah.
Then we'd be identical.
I'd shave down. We just all three have these weird little mustaches, and we just pretend like we don't know what he's talking about.
Exactly.
Steve Beverly comes on, talks about how Fall Brawl was not well received. What's really cool about Steve Beverly interviews is he's really into the business of all of it. Like, really minutia stuff. And as much as people rightfully give Meltzer credit for having the business side of things as a topic that he talks about, or even how good Brandon Thurston's doing right now, the closest I can think of back then to like the Thurston type numbers is Beverly. He has such an insight into the TV world because he was a TV producer first.
Yeah.
You know?
And a news director. I mean, his TV background. I mean, he added an element to the reporting of wrestling and specialized in something that no one else was doing, and he did it very well.
Yeah. I get the impression that most everything that Meltzer knows about the TV side of things is through Beverly and the information he let out at the time. That's the impression I get.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably Dave's TV connection, for sure.
And it's not to knock Dave. It's just people not knowing Steve Beverly to me is kind of a shame, because I listen to the stuff and I go, man, I wonder why he didn't take off the way that the Meltzers did at the time, you know?
And Steve had some issues. I mean, he had suffered with, and it's well known, bouts of depression, and so he had some challenges going on, and but he never got the I guess today they call him, you know, he didn't get the flowers, but accolades, acknowledgement, the respect. He had a very niche readership. And shows like mine always found it fascinating to bring him on because of how good he was at reporting and his analysis of what was going on in the business of wrestling.
Yeah. And he was so smart. He's sitting here talking about how the Fall Brawl still going to have good buy rates. You know, obviously people buy before the show, right? So if it's a bad show, it doesn't mean it's going to have a bad thing. So he was talking about the amount of money that you expect to pay. He broke down how much percentage-wise goes towards other avenues that you wouldn't realize. If they make this much goes here, this much goes there. So the Patreons, I'm sure, will love it if you want the full version.
Yeah,
check it out.
The whole thing is there on Patreon.
Yeah. You guys do break down how you can no longer say Big Van Vader because there was that lawsuit. Then you even mention about how they were trying to edit it out of one of the shows they did, and how they slipped once or twice. And Beverly also, again, calls back to other lawsuits that are similar, and why he thinks that that's not going to be a problem. But moving forward, you're going to see this. Like, just like you said, his analysis to me was so incredible. The confusion with removing NWA world title and just calling it the world title. Animal being ringside for War Games as potentially being a false advertisement. He was going to be there, and then he just stands ringside, doesn't get involved. And Beverly brings up about how ratings have declined all around the board. Because you'd asked about the ratings for WCW, and he's like, well, first off, no one's doing good, right? And he talks about how if football's on the same time as wrestling, football's getting the bulk of the viewership. And then they talk, and I thought this was really cool, that WCW had a very low 2 million, or two, I forget how they call it, I think it's 2 million.
A share?
Yeah,
2 share.
Yeah. And WWF Raw had an incredibly low 2.1. And those are like good numbers nowadays, right?
Yeah.
But You guys were really hammering on it. You guys go from that to talk about Dustin Rhodes and what's going on with his booking, and that's the clip I have here.
Okay.
Anybody watching that program, or especially any hardcore fan that will listen to a radio show like this, sees what's coming down the line with Dustin Rhodes. Okay, now Dustin's a great worker. He's proven himself in the ring, but it appears that all likelihood that he is going to be the person that they're going to try to unify the WCW title and the World Heavyweight Championship. And that is something that has not been taken too kindly by some of the critics out there who watch wrestling and the fans. That Dusty is really, his goal and his game plan is to put this strap around his son. Do you think that's where they're headed with it, Steve?
Well, it certainly looks as though that he's fooled us before, because there have been executives in WCW since he's been there that have reined him in and have kept him from pushing the son to the degree that a lot of people thought when he first went back to the company. However, having said that, I believe it'll probably happen here. In fairness to Dustin, I have to say that the young man has acquitted himself very well. He has proven to be, frankly, a stronger ring performer than his father was.
Yeah.
But there is one element that Dustin Rhodes doesn't have that his father did during the years that Dusty was so popular. Dusty was popular as a personality far beyond his ring skills. With Dustin, it is the opposite. Dustin has ring skills beyond his father's, but he doesn't have quite the pizzazz and charisma. It's not the kid's fault. He can't be his father. He shouldn't be his father. The question has to be issued, can you really build around someone like him? I mean, he does have a following with kids, but he's not even nearly coming close to touching people like Sting or, to be frank with you, even Cactus Jack. I think Cactus Jack has the potential to be the most popular kids performer that they've had in that organization since Sting, if they market him properly. But when it comes to Dustin, I just don't think there's the charisma or the emotional appeal that is going to make people follow him as the anchor and the flagship of the promotion. Be that as it may, I think the only thing that probably will stop that is that his father is not working for the company.
Yeah.
Or that some executive, namely Bob Dew or Bill Shaw, the two chief executives of WCW, say to him, you just can't do this, Dusty. And I don't see that happening because they're not reining him in quite like people like Jim Herd did. So that's really a major question mark. It's not, again, nothing against Dustin. I just think that it's not a matter of him having the ring skills. It's a matter that I don't think he has the charismatic personality to carry the group, but I would not at all be surprised to see this happen.
It's just the entire company and everything that's gone on there the last few years, and you just keep waiting for it to hit bottom and then start rising up. But the depths that it keeps sinking to each week gets worse and worse, and it's very sad to see. And we've talked about many times, and of course we're not going to be able to change anything that goes on over there. I don't think there is a chance of the company turning itself around at this point because I just think it's lost in bureaucracy, nepotism, and just plain old stupidity.
And I think you also have to add to that, John, Turner Broadcasting executives who, if it comes to monitoring and administrating any other element of the wrestling industry, of the broadcast industry or the Turner Company, they're probably very talented. But there are uniquenesses to the wrestling industry that these people simply do not know and know well. And they don't recognize, I think, the difference between a good show and a bad show. I'm sure there were people in that company, as I was told they did, who sat around Monday morning and Tuesday morning in the offices having their coffee, congratulating themselves on a great show. It says to me, again, you've got people who don't know a distinguishing factor between good programs and bad programs, and that's where I think you have as much of a problem as anything.
Yeah.
Good analysis.
Yeah, and I think about the way you guys break down Dustin Rhodes, about how good he is in ring and how he's a better wrestler than his dad. But that so much, especially before Dustin, with the Watts that so much nepotism turns off so many fans, that they're getting pushed because of this.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of cool to think about that. I don't know, in a bad way, but Cody was able to do, because he's probably a generation removed, what Dustin was never really able to, especially not under the WCW umbrella.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Dustin was certainly a very good young performer, and he's had a stellar career, but he never had that ability to capture an audience with the promos back then. He was still developing, but once again, once you have that nepotism, and once people know that, all right, he's getting this push because of his daddy, that automatically was kind of a disdain for him. Never gave him the right opportunity.
It makes me wonder too, because a lot of people give the idea of the Goldust character a lot of flack, and that it came in as a punishment, right? People think that Vince is constantly punishing the Rhodes family.
Mm-hmm. I think there's something to it.
That he's punishing the Rhodes family?
Mm-hmm.
He's made them millions.
I know,
wish
but
he hated me that much.
he's kind of put them in characters that were embarrassing and demeaning. They agreed to do it, of course, but when Dusty came out with the yellow polka dots, I mean, that was kind of a son of a plumber, and him, handing a toilet and all these promos that he did with Dusty, and hey, isn't that, and winks. It was kind of a way for him to tear down what the true legacy of Rhodes was. And Dusty was never really a cartoon character. He was beloved, the working man's hero and all of that. And then when he goes into WWF at the time with polka dots and sapphire and all of that gimmicky BS, that was kind of a way to say, I'm just going to knock you down here and you're going to be what I want you to be. Which, when Dusty first came in the 70s, I mean, he was on fire. He was beloved, and he was a superstar, and he should have gotten the title, I think. But yeah, that was kind of McMahon's way. I mean, it was these little subtle things. And Dustin, of course, he had to agree to do Goldust. And look what he did to Cody too. I mean, look at some of the characters Cody had to endure. So in a way, why? Why did he do this to this family? And they agreed to do it because they were getting and made millions. But if you would have just promoted the Rhodes brand the way it could have been promoted in the WWF, it would have gone over huge because of the legacy.
But I mean, at the same time,
cartoon characters.
I have a hard time believing he hates an entire family but keeps them employed forever.
Hey, listen, you're talking about a dude who is not your typical person. He is Vince McMahon, and his mind works in ways that yours and I do not. You're talking about a dude who, I mean, look at some of the things that he's done to performers and characters and what's gone on over the years with Vince. I mean, he's just, he is, I'm not going to, put myself in a libelous situation here, but he's a very unique individual, and his ways of getting revenge on people, and even, and he'd always bring people back that he had massive disagreements with because it was a way to make money. But his philosophy on treating a human being is very unique.
And it's weird when you think about it, because there's part of you, or at least part of me, that goes, maybe he doesn't care about money so much. Like, money means so little to him that keeping someone employed and giving them millions just to pick on them means nothing to him. Where to me, it's like, oh, you're going to pay me $8 million over the course of 5 years, and all I got to do is wear polka dots or something. Okay, like that sounds great for me. But at the same time, clearly his drive for everything he's ever done has also been in the collection of money and the pursuit of money. So it means everything to him in one aspect and nothing to him in others.
Right. Unique. One of a
It's just
kind.
weird. Do you think that there was any part of him that was thinking about this logistically, that Dustin Rhodes was so pushed down in WCW by being Dusty's son that by covering him up completely and giving him this wacky character, that it was the only way he was going to get out of that perception? Or do you think it was strictly like, fuck that kid?
I think it's the latter rather than the former.
Just it accidentally worked out well for Dustin.
Yeah. Yeah. He made that character. It could have been a complete joke. I mean,
Yeah.
it was really cutting edge and edgy, and Dustin had to put his whole persona into it to make it really work the way it did.
Yeah.
I mean, so maybe it was kind of a surprise for even Vince when it went over so well because of what Dustin did to it and what
Which is
he
the
put
same
into it.
thing. Same thing Dusty did with the polka dots. I mean, that's
Right.
legendary now.
He embraced it.
Yeah.
He was making him money. But was he deep down, was he proud of it at the end of the day? Was he proud of the fact that he had to go out there in polka dots? And
I
that
think
name, that brawling style, that performer that entered the Madison Square Garden rings in the 1970s that had the place explode because how much they loved him. I mean, was he, all right, I'm making the dough, but was he deep down proud of what they turned him into?
I think that whether or not he was proud of the initial moment, I think he was definitely proud of making the polka dots cool because of how good he was. That by the end of that run, he made polka dots iconic. If someone wears black with a yellow polka dot, people go Dusty Rhodes. And I think he was
Yeah.
proud of that. Because I
Yeah.
forget who it was who was telling the story, but there's a wrestler who was complaining to Dusty in the PC about something that they had strapped him with and said it's not cool. And said something, and Dusty kind of yelled at him, "Did you think polka dots are cool?" And he's like, "Well, yeah, you're legendary." He's like, "Because I made it cool," you know. And it was just like yelling at him, like nothing they give you is not cool unless you allow it to not be cool. You know what I mean? Like I think he took pride in being that good of a worker. Same as all the Rhodes have that from him.
Mhm.
If you're that damn good, they can strap any stupid little mustache on you, and you make that cool.
You know what?
You know?
That comes into my head a lot these days. And when you look at Cody and the American Nightmare and how over he is,
Yeah.
are they going to give him the title? Will he get this title, or is it something he's going to be chasing forever? What's the final rub with this, with the American Nightmare?
I get nervous about it too because I think A, he has to, but B, what's next? You know, if this whole story has always been, and I think the story started before AEW, and I think he carried it into AEW. I said it years ago on my other show, Wrestling on the Rocks. I said, Cody's leaving. He's not here to stay. And I was like, he's booking himself with a Triple H angle. The first thing he ever did was wreck the throne.
Mm-hmm.
He was building an angle with Triple H, and everything he said and did had to do with Triple H. And I was like, he wants to return and face Triple H. Obviously, the stuff that happened with Triple H is not going to happen, right? But that's what he was doing. Now he comes over and says, the one title I never got was this title. First thing he did in AEW was make it so he couldn't get the title. I don't think that was an accident, personally.
Yeah.
And I think I even said it then, too. Hey, it's because that's not the one he wants. But when he gets it, now where's your story going? Because that's been your story for your whole life. Now that you have it, now what? You just want to be a long reigning champion?
Yeah.
You know?
I'm sad that he hasn't gotten the title yet.
Me too. I'm still deflated from this last WrestleMania.
Yes.
Every
Yeah.
time I see him on TV without a title, I go, yeah.
So who knows? I mean, it could still be in Vince's head that, yeah, I'm gonna do it the way I want to do it. And he is a Rhodes, pal.
Speaking of Vince, here's you and Beverly. It cuts off a little abruptly because that's where the tape stopped. And so, but I think we know what the last two words were going to be. So.
Oh, okay.
And of course, that live Memphis show, that's where Vince McMahon has been doing those heel interviews that have been so well received.
I must tell you that question marks about Vince McMahon or not, they are probably the best interviews of their kind I've seen from anyone this year. The guy apparently is just having a ball doing them.
Yeah.
And it really shows on the programs.
Yep, and maybe we'll see Mr. McMahon. I guess he's scheduled to appear real soon at the Mid-South Coliseum.
I believe it's going to be a week from Monday night. He's going to be there. There's been all sorts of speculation. Is Vince going to get into the ring? Is he going to do this? Is he going to do that? And nobody's really sure. They've certainly teased it on television that Vince may get into the ring against Lawler. Now, I've talked to some people in the company who say they don't think that will happen. But and this is only being done, folks, for the Memphis market. It's not even being done on the USWA shows outside of Memphis. So not a lot of people are seeing this, but the fact is it has been a classic showdown between Lawler and McMahon. It's been intensely personal, and probably it has pushed Lawler to some of the best interviews of his.
Yeah. Does any footage of that exist on YouTube? That you're
I found
aware
a
of?
little bit. I played some of it on an episode or two ago. Vince being ringside. There's some really shaky cam stuff here and there. I can try and dig up a little bit more, see what I can't find. Someone's
Yeah,
got
I'd
to
love
have
to
more.
post some links on a Patreon page, and because I've never seen it either.
The other thing is weird is it's all the Memphis stuff, right? So it had the Memphis tapes. A while back, I got a few DVDs through Lawler that he had compiled of stuff, and so one of them was like everything with that him and Andy did. So obviously, I wanted that, and so I got
Of course.
Yeah, and there was a few promos in there I'd never even seen 2 words of before, and I was like, wow, like they go in here. And Lawler had his own weekly TV show out there, like a talk show.
Yep.
They had clips of that I'd never seen. It was great. But another one is some of like the rivalries and great things that happen in Memphis. And I was shocked when there was no Vince on there. And I was like, you'd think that.
Unless it was kind of Vince's agreement with them that,
Oh, never.
Yeah, could have been.
I wonder if Jerry Lawler ever made a DVD of him and Vince. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'll look around. I'll see what I can't find more of. And
so that was a fascinating time.
Yeah.
Yes, it came out of the blue. I mean, no one expected it. And the only people who knew about it were the newsletter readers or people who listen to shows like mine.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is even nowadays, I'd only, up until you guys were talking about it for a couple weeks, the story I'd heard up until now was that he went down there one time as a heel manager for Bret Hart in a Bret versus Lawler match. And that it was just this weird kind of one-off. Vince just wanted to go down there and have some fun and be a jerk to the crowd and get some booze. And then to hear from you guys that there's a promo battle, that there's word he might get in the ring, I'm like, there's so much more to this than I've even heard to this day.
Yeah, a lot to unpack. And unfortunately, it's hard to find.
Yeah. I think you even at some point to some caller had said, hey, if anybody has tapes of this, I want to see them.
Yeah.
So I guess you never got any. After your ads, you do have kind of a moment where you just heard something about Bruce Jacobs. And so I have that here.
Okay.
Bruce, now a bit of news for the fans out there. Bruce informed me earlier today that he is bolting out of New York. He's getting ready to leave this illustrious town, and more important than that, this illustrious radio station. And you'll be heading out to sunny Arizona to reside as of November 13th. That's the departure date? So at the Weekend of Champions convention, this will be the last chance that you have to say hello to Bruce, and maybe we'll make up a farewell 8x10 of you and have you at an autograph table signing your autograph to those photos. So all the hard work that Bruce has done here, working with me on and off for the last 4 years, it was a move which didn't really come as too much of a surprise. I know you had feelings about it over the last several weeks. But Bruce, we're going to wish you the best of luck. And getting news today was a little sad for me. But your work has been appreciated here, Bruce. But you'll be with us for the next several weeks until November, and then we'll have a big farewell party for you right here at the station. Maybe a bon voyage party. And, of course, we'll invite Ski and all the rest of the guys to bid fond farewell to Bruce Jacobs.
It was kind of ironic that it was my bon voyage, too.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I wonder if you even... I mean, you heard the November show. Did you have anything on the 7th? Because he's leaving on the 13th. 7th had to be the last show, right?
It probably... I don't know if he stayed a couple weeks longer...
Or if you left early.
I think we might have left on the very same day. I might have quit, and that was it for him. But Bruce always wanted to get in radio, and then he had the opportunity to move to Phoenix, and he's had a really long broadcasting career. Just based on a happenstance meeting with my sister at PC Richards Electronics Store in Long Island, where he was a salesperson and wanted to get into radio. Met my sister, made the introduction to me, and brought him in, and then he gets on the air at NYG in sports, and then has a pretty long career, a pretty controversial career as well.
Uh-huh.
He said some things that got him tossed off some stations, but he did some stuff with WFAN in New York, and he did some national stuff, and he actually just left radio. He got sick of it, and I've had conversations with him over the last 30 days or so, because I've tried to bring him on this show, and his schedule, he just came back from Europe. He was on a vacation after he left his last radio gig, and I've been having some preliminary discussions with him about the possibility of a New York Mets podcast in 2024.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, because, now that this is what I do for a living, and I'm a Mets aficionado, as everybody knows, and the work that I've done with John Gibbons on the Gibby Show, which is really a joy for me each and every week. But I'm like, I think I could do a good job with a Mets podcast if I had someone to bounce off of who is as controversial and outspoken as Bruce.
Yeah. Yeah.
And bring my nephew in, because he's a young mind who can,
that'd be cool.
Kind of, put the analytics spin and bring that youth. So anyway, we're having some preliminary discussions about 2024.
Is he still in Phoenix?
Yes, he is.
I should try and have a coffee with him and then get a picture of your producers then and now.
Yeah. He's a good dude, man. I mean, he did a lot of help with me, and it was kind of like I gave him the opportunity. He seized it, he grabbed it, he advanced, he moved on. He did some pretty cool things, and he was always somebody never to not speak his mind, and that got him into trouble several times.
That's cool. I mean,
well,
it's not cool that he got in trouble. It's just cool that that's what his career path went.
Outrageous too.
Yeah. And hey, I mean, as much as I disagree with people who get real loud about stuff that they shouldn't say, sometimes I just can't help but agree with the mindset that that's just who they are, and they passionately believe that, and that they're not going to bend. And you just kind of go, well,
Bruce was never the type to bend when he had an opinion on something. He would stick to it to the end.
No, for better or worse,
For better or worse.
Kathy Jean was filling in for Mickey B.
Kathy Jean.
Who's Kathy Jean?
She was a kind of a doo-wop artist back in the 50s and 60s. And she was a staple at WNYG with all the other old timers that were in and out of that building. And she was Kathy Jean. And what was the name of her band? She had I think 1 or 2 hit songs back then.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll have to look it up.
She's no longer with us, as most people in that building have mostly passed away.
Well, they were old timers when you got there.
That's right.
You were the young blood.
Yeah. No, I'm my fucking way out. Well, not yet, but it's like, Going to be 67. That's scary.
I'm almost 40, and I was having some thoughts
To
about that recently.
only be 40 again. The best years was after 40. 40 to 56 were really, really good for me.
That's my hope. And I don't know. I've always felt like that I was going to have, I always felt like I'd be a Jerry Stiller type, where his biggest was later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we'll see. Maybe I'm yet to bloom. Time will tell.
Time will tell. But you do an excellent job here, and I know how talented you are, my friend.
I appreciate that, and we'll see what happens. Let's see. Callers come in at this point. You take just a handful. I've only got 2 clips from the callers. First off, though, you had Rob from New Hyde Park, and he was asking if the show is going to be on 1050 anymore. And you had mentioned it hasn't been on since July. He asked what stations the WWF was on, and because they're doing that radio show, right?
Yeah, they started a radio show, with Jim Ross.
But it hadn't been picked up in New York yet. And you kind of go on this little thing for a little bit where you talk about how the wrestling talk business feels like it's dwindling and it's getting tougher and tougher to get sponsored, and that shows like yours, you don't know if it has like longevity ahead of it. It's kind of the tone of it. And you kind of start hearing that in your voice of like, this was easier to do a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's a lot more difficult to just say I'm a wrestling show and pay me. So it's tough. That brings us to Bob from Point Pleasant. And you guys have a really interesting conversation about WCW, the NWA, and ECW, and Jimmy Crockett. So I was just like, this is kind of a lot going on in this one.
Mm-hmm.
So this is our next clip.
We're going to Point Pleasant right now, and we're going to speak to Bob. Bob, you're next.
How you doing, John?
Okay, Bob, how are you this Saturday morning?
Pretty good. I got a question for you. Do you think Turner dropped WCW in any short period of time?
Well, a lot of people have speculated on that, but Turner has himself said that he's not giving up on the wrestling program. It's one of the shows that built the Superstation for him, so he's going to hang tough. Unfortunately, I wish he would take a more active part in seeing what's going on within the company and within WCW, but he just doesn't.
Yeah, I'm getting really sick of it. I'm just waiting for when Crockett comes back.
Yeah, that's a situation which I'll touch upon in a second. But, everyone's anticipating Jimmy Crockett coming back November 1st, and the wheels are in motion for his return.
Is he going to be getting any TV?
Yeah, I'm sure he will be.
Now, is it going to be like a regional promotion? Because I heard he might just have it in Texas.
No, that's not true at all. Matter of fact, we didn't even go over what took place in Philadelphia last week, but Jimmy Crockett was there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for ECW, and they have taken over that particular promotion as far as now calling it affiliated with NWA. And Paulie Dangerously is the guy that was booking the show last week. And he's now taken over the production and producing of the ECW TV show in Philadelphia. Jim Crockett was there. There was a lot of political maneuvering last week in Philadelphia, which we'll get to in just a second here, but a little bit more detail. But it was an interesting scene last weekend to observe what's been going on. And what Crockett is trying to do is affiliate himself with independent promotions around the country. And to sign these people up, to get them part of the NWA and the World Wrestling Network. So you'll be seeing a lot of activity upcoming.
Really, cause it's, with WWF, with Vince McMahon getting busted and WCW...
Well, Vince is not busted yet.
Well, yeah. But with WCW just being, garbage, it's good to see something else come along.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be seeing some different types of programming on television in the near future.
All right, thanks a lot, Jim.
Okay, Bob. Getting to that Philadelphia show, we were at that show last week. By the way, number to call, 661-1440. It was one of the hottest independent shows that have taken place in this country, ECW in Philadelphia. Now, it was a standing room only crowd. There was approximately, I would say, 1,100 people there in attendance. That tag team match in the main event featured Kevin Sullivan teaming up with Abdullah the Butcher against Stan Hansen and Terry Funk, which was a real good match. But the one that everyone talked about were the Headhunters against Miguelito, Perez, and Crash the Terminator. and that was also a pretty wild encounter, but was more wild than anything else what was going on in the back. Now, Crockett and Paulie Dangerously, Crockett's still in an unofficial capacity right now. His non-compete clause is not expired till November 1st. But you could see the rumblings there. And there's also been a lot of controversy in the last week. Another NWA promoter by the name of Dennis Carluzzo, who runs southern New Jersey and various parts of New Jersey, and Todd Gordon, who runs the ECW in Philadelphia. There seems to be a lot of conflict developing between the two promotions and the two factions of the NWA, and I don't think that's a good thing for wrestling. There's also been a lot of rumors within the wrestling world over the past week regarding Crockett's involvement back in wrestling, that there's going to be a lot of strong-arm tactics in getting people to join Crockett in the NWA. This has been a lot of rumors going on. What we're going to attempt to do in the next week or so is get Jimmy Crockett on this radio show to clear up some of the rumors and have him talk about what will be going down in the future for the NWA and the World Wrestling Network. But it's something that we're going to be watching very, very closely because November is not that far away.
It's really fascinating stuff to hear back, especially what eventually went down when Carluzzo would be showing up at ECW as their brand continued to grow and, calling in fire alarms and for overcapacity and, allegedly slashing tires in the parking lot of the fans. And stuff that Todd Gordon talked about on this show. Yeah. And in a way, it's even more fascinating that all of this maneuvering is going on. And once we leave the airways at WNYG in November, and then we kick-started into 94 when Shane threw the belt down. So this was really the beginnings of all of that stuff, all that political maneuvering with Crockett and Paul E. taking over the booking for ECW around this time after Eddie Gilbert, kind of had his personal demons overcome him. I mean, this is really interesting stuff, especially that will go right into 94 when all of the shit hit the fan. Interesting.
Yeah, this is almost a year before all that, right?
Yes. This is
already saying.
It's like, it's, this is September 25th, 93. And then we come back on August the 28th of 94. So it's literally 11 months. You look at it, and all that stuff was going on, and the brand was being built, and Carluzzo was thorn in their side, and they were fighting, and there was the, Crockett's thing never took off, obviously. And Paulie saw the writing on the wall and got in bed with Todd Gordon, and what a historic time period for pro wrestling at the time. A lot going on behind the scenes.
It's almost like at this point when you're hearing this now, you almost go, well, of course Paul would do that in a year. It's been over a year of him dealing with this lunatic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because in the moment when I first heard the clips from the other ones, so like, why would this happen? And I was just like, oh, because he said he wanted to do this and then didn't. Like, even when they're trying to like talk about like changing their minds on stuff, you go, that doesn't sound like so bad. But then you hear this and you go, well, for a year it's been festering.
Yeah, and there was always this agreement of cooperation that they wouldn't promote in each other's territories, and then they do a show together, and then it just kind of keeps eroding and the bitterness and the feud and the things that were starting to happen were more and more frequent, and then it led to that detente and that tournament and the belt being trashed and ECW becoming Extreme. So we'll have a good shows in the future because that all this unfolds.
In respect for Mickey B, I felt like I had to get the right information on Kathy Jean because he would want it that way. It was Kathy Jean and the Roommates. And their two hits, it looks like, was Please Love Me Forever and Glory of Love.
There you go.
Yeah. Although one cool, really little fact here, they was in junior high, they all got together, right? They're like 15. They got second place in a local talent show, First place went to a duo called Tom and Jerry that later renamed themselves to Simon and Garfunkel.
Yes. Yeah, because Mickey B actually played with Paul Simon. He was part of the band.
That's awesome. Did you ever get to meet Paul?
I have not.
Mm-hmm.
But my cousin Judy used to date him. She had a long affair with him, actually.
Wow.
My cousin Judy was a celebrity chef.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she's retired now in New Mexico, but she cooked for Simon and for Lorne Michaels.
Yeah, I was going to say, had to have been
Saturday Night Live crew, and she had dinner parties and with Paul McCartney and Sting and all of these. She got some. I said, you should write a book about all the things that you had to endure and see, and all these personalities that you dealt with. But she had a long affair with Paul Simon, and I think one of the songs he wrote one of his hits about her. Anyway, I digress. But my cousin Judy traveled in some interesting circles back then.
Yeah. When you say she dated Paul, my first thought was, well, then she knows Lorne, because they had adjoining apartments. Mm-hmm. There was one elevator that went to basically one apartment that you had to walk through to get to Paul's. So like Paul had to walk through Lorne's living room to get to his house.
Interesting.
Because Dana Carvey on his podcast, Fly on the Wall, he brings up stories all the time because he stayed with Lorne when he first got out there. And it was always interesting. It's like one of the Pauls is coming over, and like Paul McCartney or Paul Simon, right?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I'm sure. And all those stars you mentioned and more, he mentions just like showing up at Lorne's place, and you're like, okay, so yeah. She must have met everybody.
Yeah, she did. She did.
James from Lindenhurst. Will the Powers of Pain be at Weekend of Champions? And you said no. They're going to be overseas. And the guy said that he doesn't think WCW should go with Dustin. And again, it's strictly because the perception.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's such a shame to see how much of Dustin's career was an uphill battle and derailed just because of who his dad was and the power his dad held. And everyone even saying, yeah, it's not that he's not bad. He's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
You guys talk about Shawn Michaels leaving with the IC title, and you guys mentioned that if he does not return with it, because you assume he may be at the MSG show. I don't know if he ever showed up to that or not. But that there's rumors they're going to have a 20-man tournament, and the 1, 2, 3 kid's going to win it.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, what ended up happening was the legendary ladder match. So 1, 2, 3 kid did not get it. Razor got it.
And that was what, WrestleMania 10?
Mm-hmm.
Which I was there for that.
You were there for 10?
I went for that. I went to that show. Yeah,
that's awesome.
With a guy named Glenn Garofano, this eccentric guy in Vegas, and I mean, just an eccentric dude who worked with Rod Stewart, and he worked with Guns N' Roses, and he just sent me this. And he wants me to help him sell this. He's over the years, he got signatures on a manila envelope, like a large brownish manila envelope. And he sent me, and I'm just going to read the names on here because he sent it to me because he wants to sell it.
Yeah.
And I sent it to somebody I know, and it's PSA authenticated, except he wrote on it and wrote more names on it.
Yeah.
But here's a list of the names, and he sent me pictures of it. He didn't send them himself, but someone who works at the place that he lives in Vegas. Here are the names, and I've seen it, and I could testify to it if anyone's interested in it. I think he wants several $1,000s for it, but the names that are on this thing include Bruno Sammartino, Larry Zbyszko, Antonio Inoki, Vern Gagne, Terry Funk, Killer Kowalski, George Steele, Cactus Jack, Sabu, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Fabulous Moolah, Dusty Rhodes, Emil Moskris, Abdullah the Butcher, Steve Williams, Wendy Richter, Ricky Steamboat, Rick Martel, Bret Hart, Stu Hart, Jim Ross, Jimmy Snuka, John Tolis, Ox Baker, Jack Briscoe, Lou Thez, Tully Blanchard, Sherry Martel, Nick Bockwinkel, and some more. All on this envelope.
Is it double-sided?
It's one-sided, and I'll send you a picture of it so you could post it for people watching on YouTube.
Yeah. That's insane.
And he's like, sell this for me. Can you sell this for me? And I was like, well, show it to me. I didn't know what he was talking about. And then he sent it to me with this PSA letter, authenticating it. But he kept getting more signatures on it. And he's writing on the PSA thing, so he's going to have it redone, I think. But it's not the most aesthetically pleasing piece of memorabilia, but the names that are on it, I mean, I don't think there's a piece of wrestling history that has what this has on it.
Yeah. That's
if
insane.
only he would have had an album or photo album or something, but he had it on an envelope that he used to take around to my conventions, to the CAC conventions, and that's where he got all of these friggin' signatures.
I mean, in defense, like, if you don't know who you're going to get, a blank envelope is probably one of the smarter things to do because it's a little more sturdy than just a random piece of paper. But, like, yeah, I agree with you. For me, like, if it's not like a signed thing,
there it is.
Yeah, it just looks like a mess.
It looks like a mess. And there's Bruto and Zbyszko on the bottom, which he probably got at my convention, but there it is.
Yeah.
I think it probably has some value to it.
For sure.
It probably has a several $1,000 value to it because these guys are all dead for the most part.
Yeah, and when were they ever all in the same room? I mean, like, never. He had to go to all these, like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, he had to go. He's traveled around. He used to go, he went to a couple of conventions, and then the CAC, he'd go to every year, and he got this envelope jam-packed with signatures of some of the biggest names in the history of the pro wrestling business.
It almost looks like a piece of abstract art.
It does.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
He's almost a piece of abstract art, this guy.
Yeah.
And I went to WrestleMania 10 with him.
Was it a good time? Is he a good guy to go to with the shows?
He's funny. He's a funny dude. I mean, I've never really met anyone quite like him. He's a character.
That's cool.
And I'll never forget that day because I was in a limo going to WrestleMania, and a wheel fell off the limo. I was driving back. It was driving me back, and the thing crashed because the wheel flew off of it. I get thrown. I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I get thrown inside the limo, and I think I hitched a ride with a milk truck or something, to get home on it. It was like the weirdest thing, and I sued the limo company.
Did you use Paulie's lawyer?
I don't remember. It might have been, but
that was your guy.
They settled for like $18,000.
All right.
That kept some of my bills paid in '94.
That's why you got back on the air. Like,
could have been.
You're there with the milk money.
What a life.
You run some ads.
Story. That's my WrestleMania 10 story. We digress again, and that's the ladder match that was so famous
and Owen Brett.
And Owen, yes.
That Owen Brett match.
And the Yokozuna. He had two matches.
The LNS ad, you mentioned that if you pre-order stuff from Larry, that he will bring it to Weekend of Champions, so you don't have to bring it there yourself. Did Larry set up like a table?
Oh, he always had. He had more than one table. He had a little corner of the convention room with all his shit.
That's amazing.
He used to make a lot of dough at the Weekend of Champions.
He loved it.
He loved it.
Let's see. Nick from Massapequa asks about if is Jimmy Snuka going to be on Raw? You heard a rumor and you said yes, that you believe it's going to be a one-shot deal. You even knew like where he was at, like in the moment. You're like, oh, he should be getting off his plane right now or some shit. Which I thought was cool because, yeah, Jimmy didn't do a ton of appearances after that, so he was doing the one. Shoot Wrestling's going to be back on pay-per-view in October and November, and you think they're going to try and go mainstream. This is the Japanese one with Vader.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of cool. I wonder what happened to that. Did you ever Do you remember even watching those?
Mm-mm.
You're going to have super tickets and tables still available for Weekend of Champions. What's a super ticket?
Super ticket would get you in early, so you wouldn't have to wait on the long lines that developed there. So you'd get everybody's autograph, everybody's pictures, everyone a Polaroid with everyone. So you got like VIP access to everything.
No, and everything was already included.
Everything was included.
But even then, wasn't like a signed 8x10 like $5-6 at the
Yeah,
time?
it was cheap, and I think the super tickets, I don't even know what they were, $60 or $70 or whatever it was. And I mean, it was just underpriced, and you got a lot for your money when you did it. When you went to a John Arezzi convention, you really got there was a lot of value for the fan, and unfortunately for me, I underpriced everything.
But I think even at the time, no one knew what the prices were.
No, it was brand
It was
new.
nothing.
You couldn't gauge what this would be worth, or what this picture would be worth, or a poster signed by 10 different personalities. What would all that be worth? And I had no idea what the value of it was because there wasn't a market for it then.
Yeah.
But if I knew what I knew now, what I didn't know then, it would have been a different story.
Yeah, but so much of your stories revolve around these successes and failures in these particular orders for them to go on. I was talking to you earlier about we're getting through your book right now, me and my fiance both. It's just wild, everything that happened, and it's such a fascinating story, and it all connects. Like, if you didn't fail here, then you wouldn't have gone there.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it is like every one of these little things. If you didn't undervalue your Weekend of Champions, would you have done the next step?
How was my
You know what I
audio on it? Did I tell the story properly on the audiobook? Was it good?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty solid. Yeah. Very rarely can you tell you're reading, but there's moments where you have a break in the sentence and you can just imagine you turned the page.
Yeah. Or scroll up on the iPad is how I did it.
Yeah. The little scroll. The next caller, and this is our last clip, is Steve from West Hempstead. And he mentions reading an interview that you did for John Clark in his newsletter.
Okay.
And they are going rapidly. 661-1440 is the number to call here. Let's go to Steve from West Hempstead.
Good morning, John. How are you?
Hey, Steve, how are you?
Good, John. For your viewers there, it was a good interview with you in Pro Wrestling Flyer newsletter, John Clark's production.
Oh, you did get that?
I got that the other day, and it was very informative, and it gave a good, you described yourself pretty well in it, and it's...
Well, thanks.
You got a chance to answer some of those ludicrous comments that were made in some of the other wrestling journals.
Well, the Carlos Ray letter, okay, which I mentioned here on this program, was revealed to be a hoax.
Right.
And I did find out who wrote that letter, and my lawyer's taking care of that for me. But John Clark called me up and said, would you like to answer some of the things that have been said about you? And I said, yeah, I certainly would. And I answered all the questions that he had, and I felt better. I felt like I got it all off my chest.
Yeah. John, what's the story with the Steiner brothers? Is it anything to do with steroid testing? Is that what's going on with them?
A lot of people have been speculating that that's one of the reasons that there's a lot of problems there right now, and it's one of the reasons they're off the booking sheets for 8 weeks. They knew coming into the WWF that WWF's back is against the wall when it comes to testing. They're being closely watched.
Right.
So I just think it's, I think personally that could be one of the reasons. Yeah.
Right. One last comment. Do you have any idea when NBC on the Now segment is going to be doing that episode on the WWF?
No, I do not. I think what they are trying to do with that segment is make it timely enough to coincide with what the grand jury and the Justice Department is investigating. They want it to be timely as far as if there will be an indictment, if there will not be an indictment. But there's been a lot of heat over what's been going on, especially with Titan Sports and their lawyer, Jerry McDevitt, accusing NBC and the Justice Department of being in cahoots with each other,
And also on that WCW, the pay-per-view, it's definitely thumbs down. I never saw so many times during the show where there was no audience pop at all. Did you notice it was completely quiet?
It was dead, yeah.
Just dead. And even Jesse, I think, was out of it, some of his comments. And
I was watching. I fell asleep during the tag team title match. Even Missy Hyatt with her at ringside wasn't enough to keep me awake.
Nothing at all. She did nothing at all for the show. Just A real flop.
It would have been helped if you would have took the jacket off.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, John.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Okay, Steve.
Mm-hmm. A lot over there. I used to like Steve, one of my favorite callers of all time. But yeah, I wish I could find that John Flyer interview. I would like to read it because there was some people writing things about me that they didn't use their real names.
Yeah.
I had a handful of really bad enemies back then. Really bad enemies.
Where were they writing to? Just other newsletters?
Yeah.
Just so they would get their name out there? Hey, John Arezzi from there is this kind of a jerk or something?
Yeah, and then I had, like even previous conventions, like the Coach Kurt wrestling line, and, this guy is not going to show up, and I don't know what John Arezzi's telling you, but he will not have Ric Flair there, or he will not have this one there, and Bruno will not show up, and so there was just so much of this swirling around me that it really made me sick of wanting to continue.
Yeah. Do you remember the hoax letter? Carlos something?
I don't really. I wish, if I had it in front of me, I'd certainly say, all right. And, my head right now, I'm thinking of one individual that probably wrote it. Someone who had a very bad beef with over something. But I don't have specifics, so I won't even try to delve into it because I don't know all the specifics of what it was. But there was a lot of sabotage or attempted sabotage of some of the things that I was doing, especially when it came around convention time. For whatever the reason, there were people wanting to screw it up.
That's just nutty. The fact you also took it to a lawyer, I imagine that, I don't know, would you have actually sued someone, or would it have been more like a cease and desist, or what would it have?
Probably I don't even remember that. And the only one I could think of would be Ron Scholar, who I would have given that letter to because he was my only attorney at the time. Except for the limo thing. He wasn't a personal injury attorney. But, you go back 30 years, and it was 30 years ago. So I would like to know more about it. If anyone has any copies of that John Clark Flyer newsletter, I'd love to read it. Read that interview.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Let's see. Adam from Levittown calls in. When's Lex Luger coming back? You said in 2 weeks. Is Jim Cornette still involved with WWF? You said yes. But you also put over that Smoky Mountain's going to have a lot of talent at the Weekend of Champions. You getting a bunch of guys from over there? Cornette was working with you?
Corny didn't show himself, but there were representatives.
Yeah.
And who they are, I don't remember.
The guy also, Adam, he asks, why won't the Steiner brothers go work in Smoky Mountain with how hot Smoky is right now? And you just kind of said they have big heads and they're not easy to work with.
And that's true. And that was true.
And you said maybe they need to struggle a little bit on the indie circuit for about a year.
And it's still true.
Seems to be, yeah. Even that WrestleCon incident with Rick Steiner, you kind of, even accounting it, you go, man, a hothead out of nowhere.
They had a disdain for me. They didn't like me at all, the Steiners.
How often would you have interacted with them?
Like backstage, if I was at a WCW show, or they would just, because of how much I covered the steroid stuff, they just didn't like me. Scotty especially.
Yeah. I've always been suspicious of whether or not he would have ever taken a steroid.
Yeah, he never looked like the type, right? Big Papa Pump.
Yeah, Big Papa Pump. But yeah, that was the show on that one. I thought it was pretty interesting. I always like hearing when you get interviewed by other newsletters. I like the idea that some of these guys are just reaching out to you to go ahead and talk about it. Because, a lot of that stuff, when I start finding out that other people were just talking shit on you for no reason, it was nice that some of the people you had allowed onto your show as a platform were sticking up for you at least a little bit. Some of them.
You know, a lot of people knew the real me.
Yeah.
And I had allies and I had enemies as well. Like I say to this day, I always tried to do the right thing. I may have not made the best business decisions in my life when I was in the wrestling business, but there was a portion of people that really knew who I was and that I wasn't this con man dude who was just, you know, was not a good person. But, you know, every decision that I made was not the correct one.
Yeah.
I did make decisions that were not good and were not right. And there was never any malicious intent.
Yeah.
It was more of a survival. Sometimes I entered business agreements because of survival and because I was like, all right, you know, let me promote a show or let me do this just to survive and to earn a living. And which was, for me, sustainability was never something. There was never security. There was never a cushion. It was living on the edge week after week for a period of 89, literally to 96 when I got out.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's just a testament of who you are. Even earlier, as we opened the show, you mentioned running a fundraiser for somebody with cancer that you didn't remember it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 2013. And I just reacquainted myself with this gentleman in the music business after, that was in 13. So that was 10 years ago.
Yeah. But that's just the kind of thing that you would do. It doesn't stand out as something like most people remember the one time they promoted a show for this or did a thing for charity that was big because they don't do it often. You do that stuff so willingly and so often and just almost instinctually that it wouldn't stand out. It's another charity thing I did for another person who needed it. You know what I mean? That's the kind of person that you are.
He remembered it.
For sure. Everyone you
affected, he was like, I'll never forget what you did. And I was like, I'm sorry, but tell me. And then he did. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. I did that at Coyote Ugly for him here in Nashville and brought artists and raised money for him because he was a good person and he was struggling with cancer at the time. And thank God he's still here. And, I was reacquainted with him through another friend that I hadn't spoke to in a long time. And now we're discussing a couple of potential music projects to do together. So, I mean, it's interesting. Life is interesting and it really is. And then it's kind of funny because yesterday I was, I just watched, the VMAs, Video Music Awards, and the girl I discovered, Kelsey Ballerini, was on it for the first time. And she just made the cover of Life magazine of Time magazine this week. Wow. I mean, the top 100 most important influencers, music, sports, whatever it is. And she's on the cover of Time magazine. And I'm like, here's a kid that I, sat next to me at a little restaurant and just introduced herself to me as a singer-songwriter because she knew I managed this girl, Sarah Darling. And then when I asked her how many songs she had written, because she was an artist, she said 200. I brought her into the Black River Entertainment label offices and had her sing for me and really started working with her until I got fired for having an argument with my boss in March of 2013. And then they signed her to a record deal and she has become one of the biggest artists in the industry right now.
She approached you?
Yeah, she saw me sitting. I was having lunch with my nephew, Dominic, who was here at the time visiting, and Suzanne Alexander, who was a TV personality that I worked with at WNYG initially, and then MJC on Long Island in the 90s. And we had moved to Nashville in the same year, and I got her into GAC where I worked, and she became very, to this day, still one of the top country music TV reporters. But we were sitting having lunch, having pizza at a place called the Mellow Mushroom in downtown Franklin, Tennessee. And this little blonde girl was sitting at a table next to us with a few of her friends, and she kept looking over at me. And finally, she came up to me and she was like, "Are you John Alexander?" And I was, "Yes." You're Manna Sarah Darling, right? I was like, "Yeah, I'm Manna Sarah." She goes, "Well, my name is Kelsey, and I live here in Franklin, and I'm a singer-songwriter." And she goes, "And we're friends on Facebook." I said, "Oh, we are? Okay." And then I was like, "Well, how many songs have you written, Kelsey?" She goes, "I wrote about 200." I was like, "Really?" I was like, "Here's my card. Call me up, and I'll bring you into the office, and you could sing a few for me." So I asked her to sing her favorite 3 songs, the ones that she felt strongly about, not her mother, her dad, or her boyfriend, or whatever. What resonates to you? And then when she went into the first one, bingo. I mean, it was like this girl is a star. And then she gave me her demo, and here's a copy of it. This is from 2012. Kelsey Ballerini, there she is. And then I took her into my boss, who is the president of the label, and he heard her sing, and he was like, "Well, we have Sarah Darling, she's okay." I'm like, I said, "I think she's a star, this one." And then I went to the head of our publishing division, and I asked her to take a meeting with Kelsey and myself. And when she did that, our head of publishing got it. She's a great writer. She's a great star. And then, I was helping navigate her through the label process and introducing her to all the different departments. And we were getting writing appointments set up for her, and I was having dinner with her and her mom. And I was really supposed to manage her. But then I got fired.
Yeah. But at least
it's kind of revision. You could go, you could search Google for John Alexander, Kelsey Ballerini, and a couple of articles come up from where she says that I'm the guy that found her. But after she really took off big, I mean, it kind of became revisionist history. She's still with Black River Entertainment. So if you read my book, I mean, everything is in there.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's another little tidbit of my life.
Yeah.
I feel it's very therapeutic today. I wonder if the listeners are enjoying it, or they're going to say talk wrestling or stop talking.
The more I get into your book, the more I think that there's a lot of stories that I think are relevant in their own way. But I think people should pick up the book.
Everything comes first full circle. I'm talking about music projects now. I mean, I'm doing a podcast with a dude that I met in 1981, 43 years ago. And I'm doing a podcast with Gibby. I mean, so it's kind of like this crazy life continues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's all we got for this one. We're covering 2 episodes next week, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Unless I probably will. I mean, because they go hand in hand. But I'm trying to figure out a way whether we integrate that Howard Stern stuff too. That should be next week then.
It happened a week after this.
Well, it happened in October. It happened the weekend of the convention, which was October 25th.
Okay.
Because once we get through the next 2, then we're jumping to 1994. So if we're going to do the Howard Stern Medusa stuff, it's got to be next week.
Yeah.
And it may not be, she may not have the time to do it. She may not want to do it. It's going to be a quick turnaround. So I'm going to have to upload that interview probably tomorrow and get it to you.
Yeah.
And see what you think of it, and whether or not it would even be appropriate to have her come on and talk about it.
Well,
even if she has time,
Yeah. Yeah. Get it to me and we'll take a look, and we'll figure out what's
because you're her producer too. So, I don't have to call her directly, even though I can. I'll let you do it.
I'll be like, hey, Deuce, I got this client looking to get you on their podcast.
A client who actually introduced me to you.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's we'll see. Anyway, that's gonna do it. I mean, it's gonna be an ugly one next week, though. It really is. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to those 2 shows.
Not all the way through, no.
No, but it's not happy. It's not happy. It's not happy, John. Not at all. All right, man.
Yep.
Oh, Marsh, as we do each week, you have anything else before I tell you to give
No.
yourself some plugs?
No, I think that's going to do it. You can find me at Ref Marsh on X. You can find me Marsh Ref on the Instagram and Threads, which I'm having more fun with. Yeah, anybody can reach out for any assistance with the editing and stuff, and I'm around.
There you go. All right, my friend. It's good to see you as always. That's going to about wrap up this edition of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight. A lot of cool stories today. Don't forget, you could join our private group at facebook.com. And that is Pro Wrestling Spotlight radio show and podcast. So just look for us there. We have that great public page, the Matt Memories page, which, wow, I mean, it's really, people love that old content. Just go to Matt Memories on Facebook, and there's a public group and a private group as well, posting a lot of vintage classic photographs. And also, I mean, the Madison Square Garden podcast, the Matt Memories from Madison Square Garden podcast. I just cut another new episode with co-host Tim Poutre, and we had Carrie Silken on again, who was the former owner of Ring of Honor. It's a really interesting show. The new one that's going to be out there by the time you hear this. It is a discussion about some of the biggest names in the history of pro wrestling that never competed in a Madison Square Garden ring. And quite a number of those names will surprise you for sure. So check it out wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. It's Matt Memories from Madison Square Garden, co-hosted by Tim Poutre, written and researched by Richie Garcia. I want to thank our producer and creative director, Marsh, of course, as I do each week. And I would like to thank our Patreon executive producers, Anthony Pyrus and Joe Holloway, and for all the patrons for your support, helping with the production costs for this show. And don't forget, if you would like to become part of that community, just go to patreon.com/John Arezzi. Until next week, when we relive more history with you, this is John Arezzi for the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Have a great week, everyone.